midnight blues, and bourbon. The rain hammered against the windows of the Compass Rose, a weathered bar nestled between modern high-rises on Seattle's waterfront. Inside, amber lights cast long shadows across wooden floors worn smooth by decades of footsteps. A vintage record player crackled in the corner, the melancholy notes of a saxophone floating through the air like ghosts. Ethan James sat alone at the bar, his fingers absently tracing the rim of his bourbon glass. The half-finished score sheets before him were crumpled at the edges. Crossed out in so many places they resembled a battlefield more than music. 6 months of composer's block had left him hollow, each failed melody another small death. "Mind if I sit here?" A voice broke through the haze of his thoughts. "Everywhere else is soaked from the open windows." He glanced up to find a woman gesturing to the empty stool beside him. Her dark hair fell in damp waves around her shoulders, raindrops still clinging to her eyelashes. There was something striking in her expression, a quiet intensity that seemed to assess the world with both curiosity and amusement. "It's all yours," Ethan replied, gathering his scattered papers. She settled beside him, ordering a gin and tonic with lime. "You're either a very dedicated accountant or a frustrated artist," she observed, nodding toward his papers. Despite himself, Ethan smiled. The latter. "Though my bank account probably wishes I were the former." "I'm Sophia," she said, extending her hand. "Sophia Lynn." "Ethan James, failed jazz composer at your service." "I don't believe in failed artists," Sophia said, sipping her drink. "Just ones who haven't found their inspiration yet." The bartender slid her drink across the polished wood. As she reached for it, Ethan noticed the small constellation of freckles across her knuckles, like stars scattered across night sky. "What brings you here on a night like this?" he asked, suddenly uninterested in returning to his doomed composition. "Conference at the Oceanographic Institute," she replied. "I'm a marine biologist studying bioluminescent organisms. Today was—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Challenging." "So you're decoding the language of light in the darkness," Ethan said. "That's beautiful." Sophia tilted her head, studying him. "Most people just make a joke about talking to fish." Outside, lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the bar in stark white light. The subsequent thunder rattled the glasses behind the counter. "Looks like we're stuck here a while longer," Ethan observed, signaling the bartender for another round. As the night deepened, they traded stories like rare coins, Ethan's childhood in New Orleans, Sophia's research expeditions to coral reefs in the South Pacific. She described the silent pulse of bioluminescent plankton beneath moonlight. He explained how certain chord progressions could make people feel nostalgia for places they'd never been. "Play something for me," Sophia suggested, gesturing toward the old upright piano tucked in the corner. "I told you I'm blocked. Nothing comes out right anymore." "Then play something that's wrong," she challenged. "Sometimes beauty lives in the mistakes." Something in her words loosened a knot inside him. Ethan found himself moving toward the piano, his fingers hovering over yellowed keys that had witnessed 1,000 midnight confessions. As rain continued to pour outside, Ethan began to play, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. The melody wasn't perfect, but it was honest. When he looked up, Sophia was watching him, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "See?" she said softly. "Not failed at all." The bartender called last orders as the storm began to subside. Exchanging numbers seemed too ordinary for what had passed between them, too small a vessel to contain the unexpected connection they'd formed. Instead, Sophia wrote something on one of his blank score sheets and slid it across to him. "In case you need more inspiration," she said, gathering her coat. "Good night, Ethan James." After she left, Ethan unfolded the paper. Instead of a phone number, she had drawn a small map with an X marked near the harbor, along with a date and time 3 days later. For the first time in months, he felt the faint stirring of a melody in his mind, one that tasted of rain, bourbon, and unexpected beginnings. The science of serendipity. 3 days crawled by like an eternity. Ethan found himself standing at the marked spot on Sophia's map, a small observation deck extending from the Seattle Marine Research Center. The afternoon sun glinted off the water, painting everything in liquid gold. He checked his watch, 4:05 p.m., 5 minutes past their meeting time. "You actually came," Sophia's voice carried from behind him. Ethan turned to find her leaning against the railing, hair pulled back in a loose bun, wearing a white lab coat over casual clothes. The breeze carried the faint scent of salt water and something citrusy he couldn't name. "I was curious," he admitted, moving beside her. "I don't usually follow mysterious maps from strangers in bars." Sophia laughed. "And I don't usually invite strangers to my workplace. Yet here we are." She gestured toward the glass building behind them. "I wanted to show you something. My own version of composing." Inside, Sophia led him through corridors lined with research posters until they reached her laboratory. The room hummed with equipment, but what captured Ethan's attention were the tanks along the wall, each illuminated from within by ethereal blue-green light. "These are what I study," Sophia explained, leading him to the largest tank. "Bioluminescent dinoflagellates. They produce light when disturbed, a defense mechanism that's evolved over millions of years." She dipped her hand into the water and swirled it gently. The movement triggered a swirl of blue light that followed her fingertips like notes chasing across a piano. "It's like they're dancing," Ethan whispered. "They're communicating," she corrected, eyes reflecting the luminescent glow. "When one lights up, it triggers others. A chain reaction of light, not unlike how one note in music influences the next." Ethan watched, transfixed, as patterns of light bloomed and faded with each movement of her hand. "This is why you wanted me to come here?" Sophia nodded. "After hearing you play that night, something clicked. I've been studying these organisms for years, but I've never been able to explain why their patterns move me so deeply." She paused, "until I heard your music. There's a rhythm to both, something mathematical yet deeply emotional." For the next hour, Sophia shared her research, explaining how these microscopic organisms created symphonies of light in the darkest parts of the ocean. Ethan found himself mesmerized not just by the science, but by the passion in her voice, the way her eyes lit up brighter than any bioluminescence. "I'm giving a presentation tomorrow night," she said as they walked along the harbor afterward. "My research team is being considered for a major grant to study bioluminescent patterns in the Mariana Trench." "That sounds important," Ethan replied, noticing how the setting sun highlighted copper undertones in her hair. "It's everything I've worked for," she admitted. 3 months on a research vessel, diving deeper than most humans ever go." Her expression faltered slightly. "The timing is just what?" Sophia turned to face him, the cool evening air bringing color to her cheeks. "Complicated. I wasn't expecting to meet someone like you right before potentially leaving." The implication hung between them, fragile as sea foam. "I should get back," she said finally. "Presentation prep." Before she could turn away, Ethan caught her hand. "Let me take you to dinner after your presentation tomorrow. To celebrate. You seem confident I'll get the grant." "I'm confident you deserve to celebrate either way." Their fingers remained intertwined a moment longer than necessary. Sophia nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "Pick me up at 8. I'll text you the address." As they parted ways, Ethan felt something shift inside him, like the first clear notes of a composition finally breaking through the silence. That night, he sat at his piano until dawn, fingers dancing across keys as he attempted to capture the rhythmic patterns of light he'd witnessed in Sophia's lab. For the first time in months, the music flowed without resistance, carrying with it the promise of something new beginning. Tidal Rhythms. The restaurant overlooked Elliott Bay, its windows framing the city lights that shimmered across dark water like earthbound stars. Sophia wore a deep blue dress that caught the candlelight as she described her successful presentation. "The committee was impressed," she said, unable to contain her excitement. "They'll make the final decision in 2 weeks, but my mentor thinks it's promising." Ethan raised his glass in a toast. "To exploring the depths." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, weaving between science and music, childhood memories and future dreams. When Sophia mentioned growing up in a small coastal town in California, her voice carried notes of both nostalgia and relief at having left. "My parents wanted me to take over the family restaurant," she explained. "They couldn't understand why I'd rather study tiny glowing creatures than learn my grandmother's secret recipes. And yet here we are," Ethan observed, "celebrating with food." Sophia laughed. "Some traditions are worth keeping." After dinner, they walked along the waterfront promenade, the night cool enough to justify walking closer together. When Sophia shivered slightly, Ethan draped his jacket over her shoulders. His fingers brushed against the nape of her neck, lingering there for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "I've been composing again," he confessed. "Since meeting you." Sophia looked up at him, her expression softening. "What changed?" "Everything, I think." He paused, gathering courage. "Would you like to hear it?" "It's not finished, but—" They ended up at Ethan's apartment, a modest space dominated by a grand piano that seemed too large for the room, like a whale in a fishbowl. Sheet music and coffee mugs cluttered every surface. Ethan cleared a space on the piano bench for her to sit beside him. "It's called bioluminescence," he said, placing his fingers on the keys. The melody began softly, like distant light glimpsed through dark water. As it progressed, the notes grew more complex, intertwining in patterns that mimicked the swirling lights in Sophia's laboratory. The composition built slowly, intensity gathering like an approaching tide until it washed over them both. When the final notes faded, Sophia remained silent, her eyes glistening in the dim light. "That's how I see you," Ethan whispered, light moving through darkness. Her response wasn't words, but movement, the gentle press of her lips against his. The kiss deepened, hands exploring with the same curiosity they brought to their respective crafts. They moved from piano bench to couch in a dance of their own making, each touch igniting responses like the chain reactions Sophia had described in her organisms. Later, tangled in sheets, Sophia traced patterns across Ethan's chest. "I've never inspired anyone before." "I find that hard to believe," he murmured into her hair. "Not like this." She propped herself up on one elbow. "If I get this grant, Ethan," the unspoken implication hung between them. 3 months isn't forever," he said, though uncertainty colored his voice. "People drift apart in less time. Or they find their way back to each other." Ethan pulled her closer. "Some connections don't break just because of distance." The following weeks unfolded in a blur of shared moments. Sophia attending Ethan's small jazz club performances, Ethan bringing coffee to her late-night lab sessions. They created their own geography of significant places: the corner table at Lighthouse Cafe, the hidden cove where they watched bioluminescent algae wash ashore during a rare bloom, the rooftop where they counted stars until dawn. When the grant approval letter arrived, Sophia's joy was tempered with a new kind of sadness. 2 weeks until departure. 14 days to memorize each other before ocean depths and thousands of miles separated them. "We'll make it work," Ethan promised. Not entirely certain how, Sophia nodded against his shoulder, both of them pretending they believed it would be simple. Distant harmonies, the research vessel disappeared beyond the horizon on a Tuesday morning, taking with it more of Ethan's heart than he'd planned to give. The Seattle waterfront, once vibrant with possibility, now seemed oddly muted, as if Sophia had taken some essential frequency of light with her. Their communications settled into patterns governed by satellite availability and time zones. Video calls where Sophia's excitement about new discoveries shone through pixelated connections. Voice messages exchanged like modern love letters, often received hours after sending. "We've identified 3 previously undocumented species," Sophia's voice explained through his phone speaker one evening. "One of them has a completely unique light pattern, almost like Morse code, but more complex. I wish you could see it, Ethan. I've recorded the pattern. Maybe you could translate it into music somehow." Ethan threw himself into composing with renewed purpose, transforming the rhythmic patterns of light that Sophia sent into melodies. His once-abandoned symphony began taking shape, a musical journey into the depths, echoing Sophia's physical descent into the ocean's mysteries. Weeks passed. Success found Ethan unexpectedly when a renowned quartet performed one of his bioluminescence-inspired pieces at a prestigious chamber music festival. Critics praised its innovative structure and haunting evocation of underwater landscapes. Opportunities began to surface, commissions, interviews, an offer to score an ocean documentary. "I'm so proud of you," Sophia told him during one of their increasingly rare video calls. The connection was poor, her image freezing every few seconds, creating a stuttering effect that mirrored the growing disjointed nature of their relationship. "None of it would have happened without you," Ethan replied. "That's not true. You had this in you all along." Her expedition was extended by 3 weeks due to unexpected findings, then by another month. The distance between them stretched beyond physical measure, becoming something Ethan could feel in his bones during sleepless nights. As autumn painted Seattle in rust and gold, their communications grew shorter, the gaps between them wider. Sophia's discoveries consumed her days and nights. Ethan's growing career demanded more of his attention. When they did connect, a new awkwardness had crept in, the intimate shorthand they developed now requiring translation. "I miss you" became their most frequent exchange, a phrase growing heavier with each repetition until it seemed to mean something else entirely. One night, after a particularly disheartening call cut short by poor connection, Ethan sat at his piano until dawn. The piece that emerged was unlike anything he'd composed before, raw, complex, filled with longing and uncertainty. He titled it Abyssal Plain, named for the ocean floor Sophia was exploring, vast, remote, and under immense pressure. The Seattle Symphony expressed interest in premiering his complete oceanic suite at their winter showcase. The date coincided with Sophia's expected return, but her last few messages had been cryptically brief about her plans after the expedition. "There's talk of extending the research," she'd mentioned casually. "Maybe another location. Nothing certain yet." Ethan sent her the concert details anyway, trying to keep his tone light. "No pressure. But if you happen to be back, I'd save you the best seat." Her response came days later. "I'll try." "Everything's up in the air right now." The words settled in his stomach like stones. As November rain lashed against his windows, Ethan faced the possibility that what they'd found might not survive the depths they'd each descended to. She in her ocean, he in his music. Symphony of Second Chances, the Benaroya Hall hummed with anticipation. Behind the stage, Ethan adjusted his tie for the third time, peering through the curtain at the filling auditorium. Each seat represented someone who would hear his most personal work, the musical translation of his journey with Sophia, from first meeting to uncertain present. He hadn't heard from her in 5 days. His last message, sent yesterday, "Are you coming?" remained unanswered. The blue check mark indicated she'd read it, but offered no further insight. 10 minutes. "Mr. James," the stage manager announced. Ethan nodded, returning to the small dressing room where his score lay open. The final movement remained unfinished. He'd left the last measures blank, unable to decide how this story should end. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. James?" "Someone left this for you at the box office." A young usher handed him a small package wrapped in blue paper. Inside was a glass vial filled with seawater that glowed faintly blue-green, along with a note in familiar handwriting. "Some stories don't need endings, just transformations. Listen carefully." His heart hammering, Ethan scanned the audience as he walked on stage minutes later. The lights dimmed, leaving him no chance to see if she was among them. The first 4 movements flowed through the orchestra as planned. Midnight Meeting, Luminous Discovery, Surface Tension, and Abyssal Plain. Each note carried memories. Bourbon glasses clinking, blue light swirling around fingers, whispered conversations at dawn, pixelated smiles across impossible distances. Then came the unfinished final movement. Ethan had titled it Return Current without knowing if any return would actually occur. As the orchestra paused, waiting for his cue, Ethan closed his eyes. The silence stretched, becoming its own kind of music. Then, almost imperceptible at first, a new sound emerged from the back of the hall. A recording began playing through the speakers, the actual sounds of bioluminescent creatures Sophia had captured in the depths, their chemical reactions creating subtle clicks and pulses that formed an otherworldly rhythm. Ethan opened his eyes to find Sophia walking slowly down the center aisle, holding a small remote control. She wore a simple black dress, her hair shorter now, her skin tanned from months at sea. Their eyes locked across the distance. Without hesitation, Ethan signaled the orchestra. They began the final movement, now accompanying the oceanic sounds. What had been unfinished suddenly became clear. The composition needed both elements. Just as his life had become a collaboration between his art and her science, between separation and reunion, the music swelled. No longer just about loss and longing, but about two separate journeys converging again after traveling their necessary distances. When the final note sounded, the hall erupted in applause, but Ethan barely heard it. He found her waiting in the wings. The distance between them finally reduced to a few steps. "You're back," he said, voice barely audible above the continuing applause. "I never really left," Sophia replied, taking his hands in hers. "Everything I discovered out there somehow led me back here. To you." "For how long?" he asked, the question that had haunted him for months. "I've accepted a permanent research position at the center," she said. "The expedition taught me something important about depths." "What's that?" "Sometimes the most profound discoveries happen when you return to the surface and see everything with new eyes." She squeezed his hands. "I've seen enough darkness. I'm ready for light now." Later that night, they stood on the same observation deck where she had first shown him her world. The city lights reflected on the water, rivaling the stars above. "I finished my symphony tonight," Ethan said, "but I think we're just beginning." Sophia leaned against him, their bodies finding familiar alignment. Some compositions take time to get right. Above them, a meteor streaked across the sky, a momentary brilliance against the darkness. Like the organisms Sophia studied, like the notes Ethan composed, like the chance encounter that had brought them together. A luminous reminder that the most beautiful things often begin with a single spark in the darkness, waiting to ignite an entire constellation of possibility.